Governor Ron DeSantis sits when it comes to cannabis, so much so that RFK Jr. called out DeSantis on cannabis opposition. DeSantis opposition to marijuana decriminalization is wrong. I will decriminalize cannabis at the federal level. Current situation with contradictory state plus federal laws is absurd. States should be able to decide without federal interference. Anthony, what kind of impact do you think a DeSantis presidency would have on the cannabis industry at the federal level? Hey, everyone. Welcome to our latest Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. It's recap time. Big week last week in Denver pertaining to the Psychedelic Science Conference that MAPS put on. 12,000 strong. Big crowd. Is this a coming out party? I think it is. As well, momentum building in Washington pertaining to cannabis. So let's find out more and bring in the gents. Lead financial writer from TDR, Benjamin A. Smith, holding the fort down while we were gone. How was the week, brother?
Yeah, the week was really good. I was soaking up all the updates that you guys were providing from Psychedelic Science 2023 and from all over the place. So it looks like a successful conference from my end. It was a great week overall.
Yep. Good to see. Lots of work being done. Anthony Verrill, good to see you again. Nice to see you in person last week. Nice little setup we had recording, huh?
Yeah, I like those. I like those setups in person. We got to do that more often. It was it was good to just be in a natural setting, have the mics, and just shoot the shit out in the open.
And for those that wanted to know production-wise, we recorded 5 podcasts in a matter of 3 hours, got done around 9 p.m. Colorado Mountain Time, and it poured sideways about 2 minutes afterwards. So we got out of there in good time. Everything turned out great, and it was a good night overall.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think the content speaks for itself.
Yeah. Okay. All views of the Traded Black podcast and the guests in this podcast are pure the opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice. And the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Okay. We'll kick off. We'll get to the recap in Denver in a minute. I want to talk about cannabis momentum building in Washington. Politico recently reported that after months of a slow pace in the chamber, Chuck Schumer is getting ready for a big push on several pieces of legislation. One of which, safe banking. We've already heard rumors. We had Rob Seacrest from Polaris Capital Group on last week, who's indicated that Senate Banking Committee member Steve Daines out of Montana has said there's enough Republican votes to pass on the Senate floor. So, Ben, this is your baby. We'll start with you. Can you tell us more about Chuck Schumer's push for legislation, particularly safe banking? And do you think it'll pass this time around?
Yeah, apparently Chuck Schumer is going to make a push on several bill items. One of them is safe banking, and from what we're hearing in the media, it looks like he's serious about it this time. The old problem is, can we trust Chuck Schumer? And personally, I have a hard time doing that. Quick recap, we all know what happened with COA, had no chance of passing. Everybody knew this from the beginning, and yet there was no softening on the language to make it more amenable to some members in the Senate. Of course, he didn't do anything with the NDAA at the end of 2022 to convince Mitch McConnell to go along with it, even though he's a Senate Majority Leader. He never called a standalone vote. So we're looking at the recent track record of Chuck Schumer. There's not much to trust here. So I'm sort of, limiting judgment right here. I'm going to wait and see because I don't really trust where this is going. But by all accounts, it does have the Republican votes, so that's good. And I think it has a good chance of passing as long as Chuck doesn't introduce too many amendments to make the other side, where the votes stand right now, reconsider. So wait and see approach on my end.
Fair
Yeah,
assessment.
I mean, I think those are all valid points. I mean, just looking at some numbers, I mean, MSOS right now is up 1%, and it's hovering around 550. I mean, my Curaleaf position that I jumped in 3 weeks ago, I'm down 1.2% on it. So, I mean, the sector's just chopping right now.
Yeah.
It's trading sideways. Do I trust Chuck? No. Am I going to make any more moves until there's ink on paper? No.
Yeah.
But I'm rooting for it. I've got to stay positive. I want to manifest this and speak it into existence and get this done. I mean, I hope Chuck doesn't butcher the bill. And I mean, that's pretty much it. It's wait and see right now.
We met some interesting lobbyists last week in Denver that were big in the psychedelic space and cannabis as well. And their take was same thing. They don't really trust Chuck Schumer. And evidence has shown that. So, um, what's
I
your
mean,
take then?
the biggest takeaway there is they were very adamant about one thing. They don't care about cannabis in Washington.
Yeah, yeah.
They were very, very adamant and straight faced when saying that, and I tend to believe them.
Again, I think also it's worth noting that, and I've said it before on other podcasts, that state banking to me, I'm almost lost interest in it because it's the
Yeah,
scheduling ruling or rescheduling ruling
Yeah.
that's supposed to happen this year that would solve a lot of the problems that safe banking would purportedly solve if it goes through. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Chuck Schumer sticks to the social justice theme and introduces a bunch of amendments that are not palatable and just sort of punts this to Becerra, right? Because if it gets rescheduled, cost of capital, perhaps goes away,
that's great though.
normalization happens, and he doesn't have to take responsibility for this action and deal with, some of his base that thinks that there, is not going along with this bill. So nothing
Yeah.
would surprise me here. I'm looking forward to, Becerra's rescheduling ruling personally. Would this be nice to have? Yes, it would be. I think it would definitely help get a pop on the equities. It'd be good for the market, but my focus is sort of drifting elsewhere.
Yeah, I think punting to Becerra is a huge win if that does happen, because we need to get descheduled, rescheduled versus what's going to happen potentially with SAFE.
So, explain to our viewers that don't understand the political game. We had Rob Seacrest on last week. Said he had a conversation at lunch with Senator Daines, Steve Daines out of Montana, who said very confidently that we have the necessary votes. So, if they have the necessary votes, then what happens afterwards? Ben, maybe you handle this one.
Yeah, so it goes to the floor where they're going to discuss it again, assuming it gets past the markup vote, which hasn't happened yet, but it should pass that, and then it heads to the Senate floor where they'll discuss again, and they'll have a chance to reintroduce different amendments to it during the floor debate and so forth. And this is where it could get muddied again if Chuck Schumer and that faction introduces things that are unpalatable to the senators that have pledged for it right now, right?
Right.
That's where the big hang up. So right now, as it currently stands, I believe Senator Daines and things that we're hearing that there's enough Republican votes to pass it through. But and that's in the markup stage. Once it gets past that and goes to the Senate floor, then different things can happen, and that's where it could become unpalatable. It might lose some support, it might gain some support. So I
Yeah.
think that's where we have to watch.
So, it's not the end of the game, even if you have the necessary votes.
Oh,
Well, because
we're
they
in
have
like
the
the
necessary
second.
votes right now, but not necessarily
Yeah.
once it goes to floor. Then we'll have to reassess how many votes are still standing after different amendments come through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're in like the second quarter. We're not even at halftime yet as far as this game goes.
What's the score then?
0-0.
Tied. I was just gonna
Tied?
say tied,
Yeah,
pretty
we're
much.
tied.
All right. Elsewhere on the political front, I guess we know where Governor Ron DeSantis sits when it comes to cannabis, so much so that RFK Jr. called out DeSantis on cannabis opposition. DeSantis opposition to marijuana decriminalization is wrong. I will decriminalize cannabis at the federal level. Current situation with contradictory state plus federal laws is absurd. States should be able to decide without federal interference. Anthony, what kind of impact do you think a DeSantis presidency would have on the cannabis industry at the federal level?
I mean, I'm taking what he's saying at face value
Agreed.
because I live in Florida. Ron DeSantis runs Florida. Ron DeSantis has implemented a lot of sweeping legislation in the state of Florida. And I would argue that we have the most sophisticated, most successful medical market in the country in the state of Florida. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
This is
Like,
a
this is a
publicity,
headline. Like, this is a
stunt.
headline. This is something that Ron DeSantis needs to say in order to appeal to people coast to coast. There's a lot of people that DeSantis needs to bring over from the Trump side
Yeah.
that probably are anti-cannabis, that are sitting in the Bible Belt, sitting in the Midwest. But if you're going to take him, what he's saying at face value, and then make a decision to vote for him to be president, just look at Florida. I mean, the medical market is booming. There has
Yeah.
not been a single step in the other direction. And if we get the ballot initiatives passed and you can get adult use on the ballot next year, I'm just going to let what's actually happening speak for
Okay,
itself
but I don't
versus the
get that, Anthony.
one-liner.
What I don't get is the fact that Republicans have a majority. They want legalization, the majority. I think it's high 50s%, and Democrats obviously a lot higher. So
But
what he's actually doing, like,
you're talking about a national election.
yeah, I'm
You've
saying
got
on a
to
national basis, Republicans are like 58, 57,
I'm talking about
58.
the vote. I'm talking about the voters, not the representatives. There's a lot of people. He's going on numbers. I can guarantee you that he's got analytics that
Yep.
are sitting there telling him that you've got this big of a spread between you and Trump. This is what resonates with that base. This is what you're going to have to say and get behind to even have a chance of moving these people over to your side. And I'd have to bet that when you look at those voters that are in Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, those people don't want a candidate coming out and saying, I'm going to legalize cannabis coast to coast. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would guarantee you the numbers are telling him that he can't do that on a national scale. Do I think he's going to get in office and repeal everything? No, because I think he would have went to war with the medical system in Florida already, and he's been in office for a while now.
You think he's gaining momentum?
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
too early to tell. I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to see a very big push in any of these candidates until the debates happen, until the real national stuff starts to hit. Because
Not going to
that's when
see
you
it.
saw Trump just start stair stepping in the polls.
There's going to have to be a big turn though, because Trump is lapping every sort of Republican candidate, including DeSantis right now.
I mean,
So things would have to change.
Trump's probably going to have 3 live indictments against him by the time the debates roll around.
That's only helping him though, because the indictment, no one, like, people see it for what, at least on the Republican side, see it for the political thing that is. So I don't think an indictment would even really hurt him too much on the Republican side. So
And
let's
if
see
he
what happens
goes
in
to
the debate. No, I
if he
don't.
goes to jail,
Well, if he goes to jail and he can't run, I mean, that's a different thing, right? Then he's got the
there's a
felony on him, and
chance.
then he can't run. And
I
that's the
mean,
whole reason for what they're doing.
There's a
do I want him to
100%
go to
chance.
jail? Do I want him to go to jail? No. But I think that there is a chance that he could find himself in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Potentially.
I was just commenting on the public opinion side. Would anything happen going to jail for Republicans? Would that strike him down? Probably not. Now, if he does go to jail, if he does get a felony, then he would be prohibited from running for
Yeah.
president. So that, I think that is the goal, in my opinion. But we'll see. I think whatever candidate goes up against Trump, if he does indeed run and there's a primary and so forth, they're going to have to gain a lot of ground. I don't see DeSantis making it through this time, but he's a good candidate in the future. I think once he goes through a couple cycles.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. We could go down this rabbit hole
Yeah,
a lot deeper. I can't, for the life of me, understand why the general public thinks that Donald Trump is a viable candidate to be president of the United States. Still, despite everything, like, I don't know what people are seeing.
We wouldn't be here for days or months. We'd be here for years.
I know.
Be a long podcast, so
it's going to be a very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting study in anthropology decades from now. When
I was watching a podcast with Bill Maher.
Era.
Forget who he had on, but he was talking about how we're educating our young children not to hate our country. And when I travel to different countries of the world, they actually support their country, whether they agree, disagree. They're all formed in together. And this is what we're at right now. But
you ask kids in elementary school right now, and granted, this is something I saw on, I think, Bill Maher. So I'm just speaking in generalizations here. Most kids in elementary school, if you ask them who George Washington is, they don't say the first president of the United States. They say he fucking owned slaves. Oof. They say he was a slave owner for the most part.
Think about what this is. It's
indoctrination. There was an episode of Ben Shapiro. I'm not a big fan of Ben Shapiro, but I listen to him sometimes when I need to throw on a podcast that I think is interesting. And he had an expert on about the basis and the foundation of the education system in this country and how it's used to indoctrinate and educate from a certain perspective. Yeah. And that perspective has completely flipped.
Yep. 100% it has. Yeah. Where it'll take us, who knows? But lots of changing, and it's going to change. Let's now shift. Recap of MAPS Psychedelic Science 2023 conference held in Denver last week, which was a huge success. I might go as far as saying it was a watershed moment for the industry. Over 12,000 people attended, 500 speakers, thousands of practitioners in attendance as well. We actually attended, Anthony, the Rick Doblin, Peyton Nyquist panel, the two of them. 95% of the people that were in the crowd were practitioners. When they asked who's a practitioner in the crowd, very, very great to see. Which was even better to see was the amount of practitioners lined up around the corner at the Numinous booth at the conclusion of this panel.
Yep.
And they were selling out of, like, online courses, training courses, programs, whatever they need to do through the Numinous network, like, instantly, which was great to see. But all in all, this was a great event, don't you think?
I thought it was spectacular. Just the actual conference itself was impressive. I would argue that it was probably one of the more impressive conferences that I've been to, with like the whole body of work, everything from the art installations that were going
Yeah.
on that were completely bifurcated, from the general assembly in the conference, the scope of the conference with all the educational breakouts. The vibe that was there was great. It did feel like a breath of fresh air for the industry.
Yep.
There were tons of practitioners. There were obviously tons of enthusiasts. I'll put it at that. There were also a lot of serious guys there. There were a lot of capital markets people. There were
Yep.
bankers. There were doctors. There were scientists. It was a good mix. There were some things that I kind of thought about when I got home as we looked around as who those practitioners were. I think the name and the label practitioner in this space doesn't necessarily deem a physician or a therapist. I think it can mean several things. Um, those people that you see administering like shamanic medicine and running retreats, I mean, they also deem themselves practitioners. That being said, everyone that asked Peyton questions after that panel was a therapist or a doctor that was interested in going into therapy. I think it definitely was a watershed moment. I mean, we've got momentum. You've got guys like Steve Cohen that are donating millions of dollars to psychedelic research. You've got the founder of Tom's donating upwards of $100
$100
million
million.
to,
100
to, to,
million.
to psychedelic research. I mean, this stuff is obviously there's people paying attention. I think that there's still a dislocation in the capital markets. You saw the big boys, Cybin, Atai, Compass, they traded up and they sold off 2 days later. So they're still in the capital markets quagmire that you're seeing in the cannabis space. But I would say that this was very bullish for the sector.
Yeah.
It was very good to see. It was good to see the breadth and depth of the people that were there and that were exhibiting. And the content I thought was great. It was definitely, I would say, a 10 out of 10 as far as a conference goes.
Yeah, that's for sure. Great experience to say the least. What was I know you were getting a lot of our feedback, Ben, but when I think about even the Dr. Jeannie Fontana that we interviewed and her initiative with what's called Treat California, which is basically trying to receive a government grant within the state of California for $5 billion towards psychedelic research. She's got a track record in the past. She's actually was awarded, or the agency that she represents was awarded an $8.5 billion government grant for stem cell treatment research. So there is some pretty big, heavy hitters in this industry, that's for sure. Aaron Rodgers was there as well, celebrity-wise. Like, it really, felt like a coming out party. But, the important thing is commercialization was an important topic of conversation. You had some people I do know that are against it. But I think in order for this business to sustain itself, commercialization has to be at the forefront. How that plays out, I think we're going to start to see, some things materialize in the coming months. That's for sure.
Yeah, that was one of my big takeaways too. There was a presentation, or someone went to one of the official presentations. It was posted on Twitter, and they're looking at MDMA assisted therapy and the timelines thereof. And commercialization is still on track for the fourth quarter of 2024. So I thought that was very interesting. So a lot of very interesting tidbits came out of there in information, and a lot of good press releases, as you mentioned, the donations from Steve Cohen and the Tom's
I
founder
know.
for Tom's shoes, and also I think a couple maybe under the radar that maybe weren't quite appreciated as much as as they were appreciated over here, like the MDMA assisted therapy from MAPS, how they got the NIDA data, so that when they go for their new drug application, it's going to be a lot easier to profile the safety of that data, right? So I thought that was a very very significant moment there, because then I think the NDA is going to be a lot easier to go through with that data. And also the FDA on Thursday, they came out with draft guidance about psychedelic research and what needs to be
Yeah.
done there. So, I don't know if this was specifically related to the conference in terms of timing, but a lot of good press releases came out. And also, actually, the Numinous with Healing Maps, they came out
Yeah.
there, and they're going to be, yeah, helping them out with the Numinous network and get the word out. So it looked to be a very successful conference on my end. And even from the very beginning, when you looked at that iconic image, I think it's going to become an iconic image where you had the stadium. I think it held like 5,000 people on the opening ceremonies, and it was
Yeah.
packed. It was
More.
packed. Like
More.
like I'm looking at this going, okay, this is not just a fad or
No.
anything else. This is like, I mean, you got a packed auditorium there,
Well, you
and
had people like
I,
Jonathan Huberman,
yeah.
who's got close to 4 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. Like, they had some very smart, influential people that were there, but it's a balance between the two. Because right now, from what we saw in this industry, there's a divide that's happening. It's like the business commercialization side, and then obviously people that don't agree with that. And it's a balance between two acts. But more importantly, it's like there's one common goal. We learned at a dinner, there's 22 military veterans that commit suicide every single day. So whether
wow.
what side of the line that you're on, this shit is real. So there's obviously got to be change, but there was the powers to be that were there last week. In a nutshell, for anybody that didn't make it, this conference advanced the industry in a hurry, in my take.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean,
quick question.
and go ahead, Ben.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to ask you a quick question too, because I saw what happened at the end of the closing ceremonies, where the Indigenous groups came out and called out Rick while he was talking. I was wondering if you saw that instance, and what you guys made of that.
We didn't see that, but I mean, to me, that's expected. I mean, I think those
Yeah.
groups, those groups feel that they've. I mean, I don't want to say invented this, but that they've grandfathered this really into the spotlight. And I mean, a lot of the origins of this stuff does come from indigenous medicine. But as far as the psychedelic sector goes, I mean, Carcillo put it best when we met with him there. It's a broad spectrum. You should be for commercialization. You should also be for decrim. I mean, there's no real way, concrete way to roll
Yeah.
this out or to create the legal framework. Granted, it's never going to get to where we need it to get to if everybody doesn't get along, and everyone doesn't learn how to coexist and kind of fight for each other's causes together. Them going on stage and then Rick also shouting out that these molecules don't need to be patented. That's probably ill advised, but at the same time, when you look at MDMA assisted therapy, for instance, MAPS isn't actually going to patent the molecule. MAPS is going to get their protocol passed by the FDA. And then I'm assuming file patents around that. So, I mean, I think we've got a ways to go, but I mean, there is a stark bifurcation between the indigenous members of this industry as well as the, I guess, big business. I don't want to call it
Yeah.
big pharma,
Agreed.
but big business participants in this industry.
One thing I gathered too is that Peyton Nyquist is a very well-respected man in that entire industry. Like, when he was on that event, a panel with Rick, I couldn't help but notice how much Rick just looked up to him and how much he's been, I think in a lot of ways very helpful for just from a business model. If MAPS indeed, becomes overnight from a nonprofit to a full-fledged commercialization company, he's been, I think, an integral as far as like the building relationships, and you could really tell the way Rick looked up to him. But another thing I noticed in one of our podcasts is Joe Caltabiano, the chairman of Healing REIT, we're going to actually have that podcast out. I think it's actually out already, so maybe we'll actually add a link here in the caption. But one of the things that he'd mentioned, Anthony, was both in cannabis and in psychedelics, when it becomes commercialization, the first money always goes into real estate. Do you want to maybe elaborate on what he was talking about pertaining to that?
Yeah, I mean it's quite simple. The calculus in that statement is very simple. I mean, it's much easier to digest the cap rate being an investor, which is your actual return on the investment, versus having to bet and deploy venture capital and go into basically a black hole with something like a drug development company.
Hmm.
Granted, the returns are much more modest in the real estate side, but you own tangible assets. I mean, you own the dirt, you own the building, you own the infrastructure that the
Yeah.
opcos are going to go into. That's a much safer investment. Granted, real estate is more of a stay rich game versus a get rich game. I mean, your returns are going to be orders of magnitude bigger if you get your bets right on something like a drug development company or like the opco in a clinic company. But I mean, when I first got into cannabis, it was, how much money do you need for your dispensaries? I got an open checkbook. How much money do you need for your grow operations? In this sector now, I mean, we're looking at a massive demand for clinics, and not just any clinics, specialized buildings that are purpose built for this psychedelic assisted therapy that can also be monetized with different therapies outside of the psychedelic realm. And I mean, it's not going to be easy money to be made, but it's a much safer bet with recourse, and you can always do something different with the real estate versus
Yeah.
having the opco in there.
Yeah. Fair points. I guess in a nutshell, that pretty much recaps big takeaways, that's for sure. But all in all, really, really good week, and glad we got to experience it. Last thing I wanted to touch on, I think it's important to actually, while we were actually at the conference, looking at the crypto industry, Bitcoin touched 30,000. What do you think is the driving force, I guess, or the surge in the value? And do you think this is sustainable long term?
I do think it's sustainable long term. I think there's some fuckery going on in the industry right now. I mean, you've got Fidelity, BlackRock, Invesco, and there's about three other
Wisdom
issuers that
tree.
are, yeah, Wisdom Tree. All the big boys are applying for leveraged and spot Bitcoin ETFs at the same time that the SEC is knives out against Coinbase and Binance. You
Right.
also have a crypto trading platform that is coming out saying it's a compliant crypto trading platform that's backed by Citadel, Fidelity, and there's a third party that's involved as well. Um, there's a silver lining here because in the crypto industry, no one really cares about what's going on. All they care is that the number goes up. The number's going to go up with these market participants coming into the fray. Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think, are going to sustain this trend
Yeah.
to the upside. BlackRock, Invesco, Wisdom Tree, they don't waste their time. If they didn't think that this was possible or they didn't think that this was a long term viable investment and a viable asset, they wouldn't be touching the space. I mean,
Hey,
this
let me
is,
stop, Anthony. Can I
That's a
stop
good
you there
point.
for a second? Because one thing that
yeah.
is on my mind is usually when you get the likes of BlackRock, right? Okay, the biggest asset manager in the entire world, their policies and where they see the puck going is usually in lockstep with the regulators. So the thing I'm trying to reconcile is, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but why is BlackRock issues or files to issue an ETF for Bitcoin at the same time that the regulators are trying to disable that and to make it harder uh, domestically in the United States. So do you see a sort of a
So,
bifurcation
so
there?
let's take a step back. The SEC is not trying to break crypto. The SEC is trying to get Binance and Coinbase to come into their regulatory purview and register as an exchange and register under the securities laws that are currently intact. I don't think that they should do that. I don't think that they need to do that. But it's the SEC's judgment, and they're the ruling regulator that this needs to happen. They're not trying to break Bitcoin. They're not. If they wanted to break Bitcoin, it's easy. They don't need to file a lawsuit. All they have to do is basically shut off the fiat off ramps at every major money center bank, and nobody is going to use Bitcoin. It'll go back to the Silk Road
Mm,
days where people are using it to buy drugs and pizza on the internet. It's as
right.
easy as that.
Right.
Um, I think that this signals that the lawsuits that are against the likes of Coinbase are political theater to an extent. I think it's also that they want to make an example out of them, and Gary Gensler just has an axe to grind. But they're not going to break Bitcoin. They're not going to outlaw Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin's going anywhere. And if anything, the crazy people that are still saying Bitcoin 100K and above, this might prove that thesis. These are
So
spot
you think this
ETFs.
is bullish almost?
Oh, I think
Like
it's
you
very.
think?
I think it's very. It for me. Like I said, numbers going to go. All I care about, and all these people care about, is that the number goes up.
Yeah.
And when you've got Hong Kong coming online, Singapore coming
Yeah.
online, the Middle East coming online, and now you've got the largest asset managers on the planet want a piece of the Bitcoin trade,
Yeah.
which means that RIAs, financial planners, and alike are going to start allocating what, let's say 1 to 3% of their clients' portfolios to Bitcoin or to Ethereum.
Yeah.
That's going to cause parabolic moves. That's also going to create price stability.
Yeah.
And it's going to justify it as an asset that is an actual asset versus this space money that people keep claiming it is. I think this is the most bullish thing possible for the sector, with these guys wanting to actually get a piece of the action.
Yeah.
And I
FOMO.
thought it's been happening all along.
FOMO front and center. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There's also some surprising news this week where the new management at FTX, they've been able to retrieve $7 billion in assets after previously claiming back in March that $8.8 billion in customer funds were lost. So how exactly have they been able to recover $7 billion? Because that, to me on paper, that seems impressive.
It's a lot of money.
A lot.
It's a lot of money. I haven't dug through that yet. I'm hoping that those assets are not siloed as being a majority of the FTT token, because if they are, then they're kind of fucked. As those are liquid assets, but you're never going to be able to sell it or create a market in it. I think
So
FTX gets relaunched though.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Um,
what a better question. What's this mean, I guess, for FTX and the broader crypto industry moving forward, if they're able to claim the full 8.8 billion?
I think it's a good sign, but I mean, from the get go, from the day this happened, I mean, this has never been an FTX problem. This was an operator problem. This was Sam
Right.
Bankman-Fried creating backdoors and creating ancillary vehicles so he could essentially launder and embezzle customer funds. This was not an FTX problem. The tech didn't break. The blockchain didn't break. This wasn't a hack. I mean, this was operator error to the highest degree. This was an inside job. If you put new management in place, take away the hedge fund,
Yeah.
put guardrails in place
Yeah.
as far as the operating businesses go, auditors, a board. I mean, you've got a great business with FTX. There's nothing wrong with FTX. You could relaunch it today, and I'm pretty confident it would succeed as
So is the
doing what it,
relaunch going to be successful? Do you think they were talking about
the
that?
what?
Is the relaunch of FTX US going to be successful? They were talking about that a couple months ago.
You
Do you
I
think
actually
it'll
mean,
mentioned that.
ultimately
You mentioned
work?
that like 6 months ago, Anthony.
if I'm Fidelity and I want to get into crypto, which they obviously do, I'm buying FTX and I'm rolling the damn tech into my infrastructure.
Hmm.
It is great. It's great technology. It was 100% operator error. Like FTX, like I said, FTX, and I'll say this forever. FTX did not fail. The FTX scandal was not a crypto problem. It wasn't a failure in the system. It was a very bad actor having too much control in an unregulated industry. And
Yeah.
that is what happened. But I'd take it
Time.
off the shelf in a second if I had the money,
Yeah.
or I wanted the crypto trade. I wanted the exchange infrastructure.
You
Confidence
call,
is going to be another issue, though.
you called this 6 months ago. I think people thought you were crazy, but the more and more we learn about the industry, it only makes sense. This was a Sam Bankman-Fried problem, not an FTX problem.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a human error. Luckily, the blockchain is pretty sound, and it's public, and it's transparent, and it doesn't turn off, and it works.
Yeah.
And
It's
it didn't create
operator
there was no systematic risk here too, and I think that's worth noting. And
none.
you've noted it before, unlike say, what happened in 2008 with Bear Stearns or whatever. We had all this collapse and yet nothing really broke. Right, the price action was bad for a while, but the system
I
didn't break.
mean,
Right.
just look at what happened with First Republic and with SVB. That is a very fragile system.
Yeah.
The blockchain didn't break.
Yep. Mark Yusko, got to have him back on, right?
Yeah, he's out of. Yep, we're gonna have him on soon.
Yeah. Okay, gents, that's it. I do want to bring up one last thing, though. Thoughts and prayers to all the families that lost their loved ones in that terrible, tragic incident going down to the Titanic. I just can't believe this story. This really grabbed the headlines across the world. But I was actually reading a couple nights ago that if you were to cut your finger, that pain triggers to your brain at a speed of 90 million milliseconds. They said that the pressure that they faced in this device at like 8,000 or 4 or 5,000 feet was 346 like atomic pressure. I think that was the term it was called. But
Yeah.
when they basically imploded, it traveled at a speed, they said, of 100 million milliseconds. So before the pain even would register with them, gone. I cannot
Oh, they
believe.
didn't know it. They didn't know it happened. It was instantaneous.
And some of the stories, the reporter, one of the first journalists that went down, what was it, 15 years ago, was interviewed saying how strong the currents are at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And they have these sandstorms, and they, the one sandstorm wedged them in beside the hull and this propeller. And I'm like, holy
I mean,
jeepers.
I don't think I would ever do that no matter how much money I had. I'm going to space. I would much rather go to space. As crazy as space is, I think it's a much more controllable, transparent environment versus being 2 miles down in the ocean. That's probably the most treacherous environment on the planet.
And it
I was
doesn't
telling
take
my
I'm
long.
wife
not.
too that I would never go down there because unlike say a boat or even the original Titanic where they have safety boats, if you can get, a seat in one, if the Titanic goes down in a sub, you have no fail safes. If something goes on
Not zero.
or you're done, you're done.
Done. You're completely
I guess
done.
you
Think
can
of
say the same thing for a plane and, and a
And
few
to
other
be
things.
honest, and to be honest, like I don't want to throw like shade on the people that died. I mean, obviously it was a very tragic incident, but if I'm a billionaire, I'm doing some due diligence before I go 2 miles down into the ocean. Like there were red flags galore about this
all the
submersible company.
deficiencies. Yeah. I
Like
actually think
I
about James.
value my
Yeah.
yeah.
Think about James Cameron. He went to the Mariana Trench, which is 3 times deeper.
He
However,
also he built that himself.
well, he worked with NASA, and it
He
took
he
7 years to build.
yeah, he funded
You went down
he
to the Mariana
funded
Trench?
he
That's like
Yes,
did, yeah.
35,000 feet.
37,000 feet.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
He built that he built and funded that himself. If
Think
I'm a
about that.
billionaire though, I'm doing due diligence, and from what I've seen online by simple searches, anyone that did just top line due diligence on that company, there's no fucking way I'm going down there.
Yeah.
Zero percent chance.
Like, what are the
Remember
pressures down there? The pressures must be like
I can't imagine 37th. If you're at I forget the term, leave a comment below. Let me know what the proper term is when it comes to the atomic pressure. Like it was 346. I saw a YouTube video of what the pressure would be, like one of those train cars or whatever, like the rails, like compartments that hold fuel, and those are made of like solid steel. And even at one atomic pressure, like what it did,
It-
it
yeah.
imploded, yeah.
yeah. But I'm at 346. But I guess the part that really grabbed my attention, well, not the only part, but just the idea of that journalist talk about how strong the currents are at the bottom of the ocean. And then you get this huge sandstorm at the bottom. And I'm just like,
Have you ever like scuba you've never scuba dove, have you?
I've done a lot of snorkeling. I've never scuba dived though.
So if you get to like 100 feet, which is nothing, you feel it.
I
Like
bet.
it's a completely different world. So
And then
I can't imagine going down just even
and they say it
two,
does not
three.
take long to get dark. How is it like you at 100? You've scuba dived down 100 feet?
Yeah.
Is it dark? I'm
Yeah.
sure it's. I'm sure it's pretty.
I mean, you can see the sun, but like it's not.
Yeah.
The water's
Ben, what do you think,
you got to
buddy? We gonna
respect
do
it.
this? You do a podcast going down to the bottom of the ocean? I don't think so. I think Anthony's out too. So am I.
Yeah, I'll
So
stick
Yeah,
on I'll stick on the let's do a podcast on the beach or at the hotel pool.
I'm all for going to space.
hey, you
I
know
have
what? We
zero
are gonna do a
interest.
podcast. Mr. Matthew Wiz Buckley, Top Gun fighter pilot that we met last week, who's actually an advisor for Healing Read, wants to take us up in a jet. do a podcast from there. I don't know how that's going to go. Mid
Oh,
sentence, I'm going to be.
you don't have to twist my arm. I'll go do that right now.
Would you do that, Ben?
You might have to twist mine though. I'm not.
I,
I'm not a
I,
huge fan of aerial participation, but I mean, I'll do it. I'm better than I used to be. Put it that way.
I would do it, but it would be a mess. Oh,
Oh, dude, no way. That'd be fucking amazing.
I'd be throwing up. Like I'd be just sick.
Would
And
you?
oh God, yeah.
Oh,
Are you
you got
talking
sick
in
with
a fighter plane?
You got sick with Rob Seacrest driving. There's no
Oh,
way you're not.
It pisses me off, but I'm the type of guy where it's like, you know what? I'd rather go through the pain to live to tell about it versus missing out on something.
Does he want to do
Um,
this in a fighter plane or like a?
Oh, no,
Talk
fighter
about
plane.
it.
It's a MiG fighter jet.
Right.
Whoa.
So I think, you know what we should do in that jet? Maybe you throw you in, and Wiz could actually bring up, we do a sink or swim. So if we say swim, we're going up. And if we're going down, we're going down. That's what I want to see. What do you guys think? You love that idea? Let us know. Fighter Pilot Podcast. Love it.
I'm completely fine with all of that. I will get in the fucking plane right now and go.
All right, gents. Good checking in. Thanks for the recap. We'll see you guys later this week, okay?
Awesome. Talk soon.
See you guys.
Take care. Hey, everyone. So what'd you think of the interview? Did you like what we asked? Is there any information you want to learn more of? Then leave a comment below and let us know what you think. As usual, share this video with your network, smash that like button, and most importantly, make sure to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.